Hello, everybody, and welcome to Richard Clarke and Walter chatting non-duality. I'm just trying to put it on gallery so I can see everybody, but um, all right. Well, looks like we're on YouTube. Let me just check. So, if I have to maybe do something with the audio here. Well, I'll check in with the YouTube chat in a minute. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in. I will in the chat, and also feel free to join in the Zoom, and you can ask your questions live in the Zoom. And with that, I just want to welcome Richard Clarke. Thank you for being here on the podcast.
I'm very happy to be here and be with you, Walter. It seems like with these podcasts, actually, you do real interesting work, ferreting out folks like me.
Yes, well, Ramana Maharshi is something I sometimes read about or watch a video, and I found you that's how I found you on Facebook, I guess, was through that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a fascinating story. I was looking at um, all the spiritual paths you've been through and all the experiences you've had and the travel and the people you've met along the way. And I thought we could maybe get into some of that. Um, Starting with you talk to Jesus by the Red River.
That wasn't me. That was my mother.
Yeah,
That was my
yeah,
mother.
yeah. Spiritual mother.
That's right. So you're kind of a second generation uh, person on the spiritual path. And so before I was 10 years old, my mother had talked to me about reincarnation and those kind of things. And she, all her life, she said she had a guide who would speak to her in her left ear. And when she listened to her guide, things went well.
Nice. Yeah. Well, that's how that works usually, I
Now,
suppose, right?
that's right.
With
Now,
guides.
Uh, also, she said, I don't usually tell this story, but she said when I was born, it was her first experience in the light. And I was in a hospital on the way to the hospital, in an ambulance on the way to the hospital, and she was having the babies, and the drivers were yelling at her, "Lady, can't you wait?" And then the ambulance filled with light, and I was born.
Wow. And so how did you how did you get into like Zen Buddhism and I know you had some psychedelic experiences.
Right. Well, I started with LXD when I was about 21 in Big Sur, California, on the 4th of July one year. And uh, after that, kind of I was standing differently looking at the world. And I read a Hermann Hesse book, Siddhartha, which is another telling of the story of the Buddha, really from another kind of point of view. And Siddhartha, after his long journey, ended up just as a boatman sitting by a river, watching the river going by and being peaceful. And that just seemed so appealing to me that then I started kind of on the path and read, was attracted to Chan Buddhist stuff, found a book, Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, full of many, many Zen stories. And I read that and absorbed it, and that got me going. Except at the time, what I was doing was just reading and trying to figure out what to do about it. I didn't have a teacher. I was just me in the books. And it was really that way for a long time. And I had listened to this Chan stuff, and I knew the mind was the troublemaker, but I had no idea what to do about it. And then I had a girlfriend take me to see some guy in Santa Cruz with an odd name. It was Nomi was his name, and he was all dressed in white, and he was saying stuff that somehow I knew was true. I didn't understand a lot of it, but I knew it was the truth, and I never heard anybody tell me the truth before. And
Wow.
it turns out he was a Ramana guy, and I have been from him and on my own absorbing what Ramana said then for more than 30 years. And,
Well,
you
when
know,
you say the truth, if I can just interject,
sure, of course.
you said you never heard the truth before. So what is the truth?
What is the truth? Okay, well, it's easy. The truth is just got a few points to it. The first is that who we are is what is always there. Uh, we're not something that comes and goes. We're not something that we have to attain. It's something that we always are. And we don't see it because of wrong ideas that we have about ourselves. And that it's possible to clear up those wrong ideas. Ramana taught and Nomi taught a practice called self-inquiry. The problem or the solution to the problem, they say, is knowledge, but not kind of conceptual mental knowledge, but direct self-knowledge, knowledge about yourself. And it turns out when you change how you view yourself, it's funny. You change the whole world.
Yes, yes,
And
that
so
is true.
that is the heart of what he says. And self inquiry that Ramana taught is a direct way to get that knowledge about yourself. What happens with self inquiry is you start to investigate what you think about yourself. And as you look at different ideas, you start when I started thinking about myself, then I start thinking about myself as different roles. I'm a man, I'm a worker, I'm somebody who does this, I'm somebody's son, and all of those things come and go, and I know all of those different things, so I can't be them. I know them. I can't be them. I'm the knower, not what I know. And somehow through that, my view of myself has changed drastically.
Oh, so could you give us a contrast, like how you used to think of yourself and how maybe now you think of yourself?
I, I well, I used to be this guy doing this stuff, and now I'm this guy doing this stuff. But where I stand is different because I used to be doing this stuff as somebody doing this stuff. And now I'm more doing this stuff more freely and kind of knowing, watching, observing, witnessing, rather than participating in the same way that I used to.
I see.
It probably doesn't make much sense because, this isn't the way that we usually think about things. Maybe one way I can explain it, after I came to Mexico, where I live now, I was riding along on the motorbike I drove at that time, and I was passing by our local Walmart. And all of a sudden, I just had this flash about how it's funny, you know, uh, what what we think is real is all of this sensory experience that is coming in, but all this sensory experience continues to change every moment. But within this, there is this awareness that is always there, that doesn't change, even as the sensory experiences change. And it's funny because we think the sensory experiences is where we find reality, and we ignore this consciousness that is always there.
It's almost like it's heard it is called the sixth sense. This awareness.
I've heard it called, Nomi called it an inverted view.
Hmm. Inverted view. So I'm curious how you really got into teaching Ramana, and in other words, like it seems like that was the path you stuck with. Maybe previously you would be switching from different things and trying things out, but
Well, all of it is I'm still trying to
yeah,
figure out what's going on.
yeah,
And the important part for me of what's going on is what's going on with myself. And in the Buddhist path, I learned that what was a problem was attachments. Only in 15 years or 25 years, I never learned what attachments really were. And when I came to Nomi and started to hear this teaching of Ramana Maharshi, I actually started to understand attachments. Attachments are based on misidentifications. I put my identity outside myself into something, and then when something happens to that misidentification, then I suffer. Like when you get a new car and you get your first dent in your new car, the first scratch, and then you suffer. And you suffer because it's like something happened to you. And this is all just attachments, and it's where based on that attachment, you start to project your identity outside of yourself. And when you do that, then there's trouble.
a case of mistaken identity.
Uh-huh. And
Uh,
so you could say the whole problem behind suffering is this mistaken identity. You know, when
yeah,
when we start off as a baby, we move things around and run into things and start to build this model of the universe and this model of ourselves. And we make the assumption very early in life that we are this separate being in this big complex world, and that's who we are. And so then when stuff happens to that being, or stuff that that being cares about in the world, then you suffer.
Mm. Yeah.
And so understanding that uh, has been a real big help. Uh, the next question after you understand it for me is what to do about it. And,
That's a good question.
and what to, you know, to me, it seems like what I've learned is what to do about it is to spiritual practice, to look within yourself, get where your mind is quiet, and then see what you know.
Yeah.
And again, the Chan Buddhists said the mind is the troublemaker. And I feel like I know a lot more about how the troublemaking mind works. Because,
So,
go ahead, please.
oh, it's just so is there a way to train your mind?
Uh, I guess part of the practice is changing habits of your mind. For me, the first part of the practice is that I found when I first started to try to do self inquiry, uh, I just couldn't get very far and I couldn't get into it basically. And what I started to do is then if I sat down to meditate for 20 minutes, I would do mindful breath watching for maybe 17 or 18 minutes. And finally, my mind got quiet enough where I could ask myself, who am I? And kind of get into the question without all this mental noise. And this is what the Hindus call a sattvic mind, a peaceful mind. And so one of the things that I learned is that I can give myself the sattvic mind more by the kind of choices I make in life. There are some people you're with who just kind of agitate you, and I've I don't have many of those friends anymore. And you learn to make choices that make you more peaceful. I think that's the beginning of it. Then there are a lot of different ways after that to quiet your mind. Mindfulness is one of the regular ways. People still really struggle quieting their mind with mindfulness and those kind of techniques. But you keep it up, you learn to do it.
Do we have a question out there? Go ahead. Oh, I just see Doug. Sorry, Doug. Anyway, go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry. I thought Doug had. Anyway, you know what I'm curious about too is like these sat sayings you do.
Uh huh.
Yeah. Can you tell me about a sat? Because one thing I heard about Ramana Maharshi is there's a lot of talk these days about calling, it's called Neo Advaita, I guess,
Right. Right.
And when was first checking it out, my understanding is that I'd say the godfather or the originator would be Ramana Maharshi of that satsang style of sharing some kind of a message.
Well, Ramana's main way that he taught was not really satsang. He said the main way he taught was in silence.
Mhm.
So if you go to see Ramana, most of what you would see was him and other people sitting in the room that shows in the picture behind me. This is the old hall at Ramanashram. I took this picture when I lived there for 8 years before I moved to Mexico. And anyway, people would come and Ramana was silent, and uh, people just got it, some of them. And I read stories of some of the people, and they would say, I came with lots of questions.
Right,
But
right.
as I sat there, the questions just went away. And so,
That's interesting. Now, how is that? Because I don't know if I just sat and didn't speak if there would be any benefit to hanging out in front of me. So I just picture that and I wonder like, what kind of vibe was going on there or
uh huh.
yeah.
Well, Ramana says that it's, what kind of vibe is some kind of nonverbal heart to heart direct communication. I don't know what kind of vibe is going on. I know for that to happen, I think you have to have a real high degree of readiness so that you can sit there and not be plagued by all the crap in your mind. And certainly sitting there, one of the things I know is you see the teacher, and the way humans are wired is we are wired to be in rapport with other people around us. You see that some in like group meditations where because of the vibe in the meditation, people have deeper experiences than they do on their own. And so I can't really tell you what goes on. I know in terms of the deeper vibe in group meditation, that's something that I've experienced. And having meditation groups that I run, I see that. And interestingly enough, once COVID was here and I started to do these things over Zoom, is I have found the same experience, group meditation experience happening over Zoom when your experience with these other people is little heads in boxes on your computer screen.
And so I'm just looking here. Started Mexico satsangs, short talk, known video discourses, uh, Muji, Rupert Spira,
Uh
silent
huh.
inquiry. So tell me, what other teachings are, or maybe, yeah, if you can distill some other aspects of this teaching, other than, so it's Who Am I? Is a, or
Who Am I is the book that is probably the best known from Ramana. And Who Am I uh, is actually, there's an interesting story behind it. It was the material from it came when Ramana was about 21 years old. And imagine where you were when you were 21, by the way. And then Ramana had been self realized already for 5 years by then. And uh, he got realized at the age of 16. His father had died when he was 12. Then Ramana went to live with an uncle, and one day in his house, everybody was gone, and Ramana just had this feeling, I'm going to die. And what he did with that feeling was he just laid down and said to himself, okay, if I'm going to die, let's do that. and he laid and got perfectly still, and his body still, and even got his breath still. And somehow he saw that uh, there was something besides all that body and mind that was going on. He described it initially as a current within himself. And when he experienced that, everything changed. And then a few weeks later, he left his home, took a few rupees, enough to get on a train ride, and went away to some magic place he had heard of from his uncle called Arunachala.
Okay.
And when he left, it was interesting. He left a note, and his note said, I have, in search of my father, according to his command, started from this place on a virtuous enterprise. Indeed, I have this day embarked. Therefore, for this action, none need grieve or trace this one. No money need be spent for searching me. And he signed the note, this. So,
Oh wow, this.
this. And,
What did he mean by that? This.
well, he wasn't a person anymore.
Oh yeah, I see.
And, again, it's a pretty heavy sign. So anyway, 5 years later, the book, Who Am I? When Ramana got to Arunachala, he stayed there. There's lots of stories. He would basically sit quietly and meditate for years. And it was India, so people accepted, here's this young Swami doing this. And the people who didn't were not as free with it were the neighborhood kids who would, how kids are, they would throw rocks at the Swami to see if they could get him to respond and do things like come over and pee on his back. And anyway, so he kept moving around for a while, higher up into the mountain. And so people got to know about him. And after a few years, then some guy came to him with a series of questions that he wrote on a slate. And Ramana was still in silence, and he wasn't talking, but he answered those questions, scratching the answers in the dirt with his finger. And somebody wrote all of these things down and later published them in this book, Who Am I? And one of the things I think for me that is interesting about Who Am I is this was basically teachings still pretty much fresh from his enlightened experience of when he was 16. And, he hadn't been teaching, he hadn't been interacting with the world. This was, immediate experience fresh from the source.
Yeah.
So,
So when you say that, are you implying that the longer someone is from their experience, it changes?
well, again, it depends. In the case of Ramana, uh, what he knew about himself didn't change from the first stuff that he wrote until he was ready to die in 1950.
Hmm.
So one of the things you see in some people's teaching is an evolution of the teaching. And if there is an evolution of the teaching, then What I suspect is that it's still mental, because the thing that will evolve is your ideas about these things. Uh, what I've seen from my own teacher, Nomi, and what I understand from Ramana is there is a kind of knowing that uh, is kind of permanent.
Yeah.
You know, it's so
Well, I would
deep.
think if it sounds like when you say he was not a person anymore,
Uh
that
huh.
that wouldn't the person wouldn't come back.
Well, again, the when there's are different stages in self-realization, it looks like there while you're starting to learn, you know, you still are clearly identified with yourself and your body and all of this stuff. Then you get the idea that you are not that. Then there comes a place when uh, you start to have experiences of that and to know it. Like for me, an example of that might be when I'm walking in the morning and all of a sudden it seems like the trees around me almost are glowing or something. And I just have this sense that, you know, all is Brahman, all is God. I am that. And all of this is that too. So uh, you can have those experiences. So with those experiences, then you have touched this spiritual depth, but you still are not self realized because you still come back, and I still come back and think I am this body. And if I get my hand hit by a hammer, shit, it's going to hurt and stuff like that.
So
And
when you say I think I am this body, what is the I that thinks that
that's the
it's
question.
body?
What is the exact question is, what is this I? You know, when one of the things I learned to do in my own inquiry is before I start asking myself, who am I stop and notice I exist. I exist and I know that I exist. And if you look at how, look for yourself, do you exist? I mean this.
Oh, do I exist?
Do you exist?
As as what?
Do you exist?
As it depends what you mean by you.
Well, and it
I
means
don't
what you,
I don't see a separate independent individual
uh huh,
here.
uh huh. But do you
It,
see existence? Is
there's
the,
an apparent something going on, but there's no one here to know what that is, you
uh
know.
huh. So, how do you know that you exist? Do you know it is a sensory experience?
I don't know that I exist, is what I mean.
You know, anyway, I think we may be lost in semantics because that's part of the
Well,
problem is,
there isn't a separate knower
right?
to, you
Separate from
know,
what? Separate from what?
whatever's appearing to happen. There's a conversation going on, there's words coming out, but I
Uh-huh.
don't, there's no speaker of words
Uh-huh.
or
Uh-huh.
listener of words.
So
There's
anyway,
no, there's, you know what I mean? There's not two separate individuals
sure.
having a conversation here.
Sure. Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So it's hard to answer the question from, I don't know, because I think I exist as some kind of a memory or some kind of an apparent experience for Richard Clarke and whoever else is watching, you know?
But the uh, point I was making about this question that I've learned to ask, starting with inquiry, about noticing I exist and I know that I exist, is that when I examine how I know I exist, it is not uh, a sensory experience or it's not a mental experience. There is a knowing that is somehow inherent within existence. So you just know. And that knowing is a kind of non cognitive knowing. And so, anyway, well, to continue what I was saying about uh, self realization, is there is a process where uh, you start to have this deep inner knowledge and experience of the knowledge, but still uh, revert to your identity or your imagined identity as this person. Maybe this person has changed, but you're still this person. What's going on, Ramana would say here, is that what keeps us as this person are our vasanas, our tendencies. And these tendencies are like mental habits. And your identification, you're identifying yourself as a body, for example, is a mental habit, a mental tendency. And it's something you still hold to because you still hold that habit. And so Ramana says the path to realization after you have started to have experiences of who you are, the path to realization is actually through dissolving these tendencies. And, my teacher, Nomi, went through this for a couple of years after his initial experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But then he had, then it came and went.
Just
And
for the folks at home, could you tell us what the Nirva Kalpa Samadhi?
this is where there is just one. And I can't really say much more about it. Uh, the For people, when they have that experience can be what you say call a life-changing experience. And Nomi was a teenager when this happened to him. And then he was not interested in school or not interested in any of those things he was interested in before. And he took money out of his mother's purse and got a ticket to California and met some Swami who taught him about Ramana. And that started to give him a path. Anyway, these vasanas, one of the things that Nomi teaches that I have not heard from other teachers is how to deal with vasanas. And I think there he was teaching what he had gone through himself. And so he said there are two things about vasanas. The first is they're based on a misidentification. So if your vasana is that you love chocolate, then the misidentification is as a body. And the other part of the vasana, besides the misidentification, is a mistake in the idea of where happiness comes from. So, uh, to deal with vasanas, then you can address them in two different ways. The first way is to inquire about the misidentification. Again, if I think I'm a body, am I a body? How do I know I'm a body? What does it mean I'm a body? Uh, if I'm a body,
Can I just ask you a
yes,
question? So this inner dialogue that's
yes,
happening when you're
yes,
saying, "Am I a body?"
yes.
I just I just get stuck on what's asking the question.
Uh-huh. That's a very high view.
Well, it's not intended to be high or low. It's just
But anyway,
because anyway, if there's a body, like if you think the body is what's speaking, you know,
mhm.
then you would be it would be the body asking itself if this is
Right,
itself.
right. Yep. And it's good to know what's really going on.
So, it's kind of like I think what ends up happening, uh, and it's not like this was my experience, but I imagine you just get to a dead end, and you realize there's nothing there.
Well, yes, they speak of getting to a place of blankness.
Mm.
And then when you get to the place of blankness, like you were saying, then you can ask, who knows this blankness? And that's actually where it gets interesting.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yes. Who knows this blankness? That I think that is such a beautiful question because even when somebody says there's no one here, it's like, well, what knows that
Right.
there's no one there?
Ex-
Who's making a claim
Exactly.
to be a nobody?
Exactly.
But it's a never end. There's no answer.
But still, this blankness, and so there's something going on, whether there's an answer or not. The answer, I would say, there's no cognitive answer. There's an experiential answer, and the experiential answer is how can you not know this consciousness? You are this consciousness. You know this consciousness by being, not by any cognitive thought. So the knowledge rises from being rather than thinking. That's the best way I can explain it. And
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's
and
beautiful.
and a lot of, for me, the practice is getting past that point of wanting to think about it. I've always seen myself from this viewpoint as a smart guy and I can figure out anything. And except it turns out that I couldn't figure out non duality.
Yeah.
And so, what I have had to learn to do is to get past that part of my mind that wants to figure it out and get it where it'll just be quiet and shut up and let me be.
Yeah. I've heard the term pure beingness, just a beingness without a beer, you know, uh,
Mm-hmm.
like no doer, but
Right,
there's doing, that's
right.
the part I think people kind of, at least from my, like, there's still this apparent doing. There's still a Zoom
Right.
conversation happening. There's just no one in here doing the talking.
Right. Again, it's a wonderful question. And for me, you have put your finger on what is the strongest vasana of mine that I have not resolved. This, for me, is stronger than the identification with the body. It's the identification with the doer. When I was a young man trying to figure things out, one of the things that I felt very clearly is I know I exist because I can see my effect on other things in the world. I can see my effect as this doer. So I know I exist because I do. Instead of I think, therefore I am, I felt like I do, therefore I am. And, one of the things that Ramana teaches is that the best approach is passivity, to let it unfold as it will. And, I can do passivity some, but I'm still working on it. And I'm still working on it because, for example, of these things I do on YouTube. I do them on YouTube because I had this idea. And then I did a bunch of stuff and manifested that idea and see the reflection of it coming back in the world. And it confuses me about who is doing what. On one hand, I feel like what is happening is I'm just expressing naturally what comes from within. But on the other hand, it seems like I'm doing this crap too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was Blake or he said, what seems to be to those that it seems to be.
Uh-huh.
So it's like whatever seems to be happening is what's happening there, as they say, In other words, if there's an experience of being an individual, then that's what seems to be happening. Then there's an experience of an individual. It's
Right.
fascinating, in other words, it's whatever's arising. It could arise as an experience of being a separate individual in time and space with free will and choice. And and being a decision maker and a doer and all this stuff. So even that can arise, and I see you have like Rupert Spira on the like he would say maybe like in this empty space of awareness, even the experience of being a separate doer could arise in this same unit, let's say blank space of awareness, empty void.
But of course, the one problem with any of those ideas is they're just ideas.
Mm.
And still, our experience is deeper than those ideas, or it can be if once you start to look. And to look, you have to be able to get quiet.
What would it mean to look for the looker?
Well, looking for the looker is another thing that can be tricky. I myself have spent years trying to be conscious of the consciousness. And the problem with being conscious of the consciousness is that in kind of the usual way of looking, the only thing you see in consciousness are objects of consciousness. And so as I look around for the consciousness, what I see are all these objects of consciousness, and the consciousness isn't there anywhere. Uh, when one of the things that I've found in meditation, though, is that you can get real quiet. And when you are real quiet, you can be conscious of the consciousness with no object. And it
Oh yeah,
seems,
same word. I know. So is there a subject?
but it does not, the subject seems too small to me. Because the subject, it doesn't fit.
So yes, well, I've heard the term, let's say, awareness, aware of itself. Let's say,
Uh-huh.
and but there's no vantage point or point of perspective. It's just oceanic.
Mm-hmm.
Could you like Ramana? Does he talk about that? He talks about the I think. Is that
Right,
correct? Could you
right.
say more about that?
Well, when he's saying I, again, part of the problem in talking about this stuff is that language isn't designed for it. Language is designed for dealing with objects. And uh, whatever it is that I am, that existence is not an object. So anyway, Ramana still talks about it, even though you can't talk about it, and to express this, maybe I don't know what you would call it, this inner eye, or the eye that is at the same time the universe, unbounded and unlimited, and like you're saying, with no perspective, then he calls it I, as opposed to I. And so this is I. He said one of the things from the Bible that he quotes is, I am that I am.
Mhm.
I think you could argue that that even is too complex. The more true statement is just, I am.
Yeah.
And so when Ramana says, I, he is pointing to that I am.
And Nisargadatta has that famous book, I Am That.
Yes.
Um, and earlier when I mentioned, I was trying to just describe what I perceived as the evolution of these meetings, like Papa G, for instance, would have
Mm-hmm.
Ramana Maharshi behind him in a big, beautiful picture. And so would Nisargadatta Maharaj and
Uh-huh. So did my teacher know me?
Ramesh Balsekar. And so many people pay tribute or give credit to Ramana. And so it just seems like he had a lot to do with what's being spoken of today as, non-duality.
Uh-huh. Now, you also talked about the neo-Advaitins, which are a kind of a uh, subset of the Ramana followers. And the reason why they are the heart of the neo-Advaitin ideas is the idea that since I am already that, then I don't have to do anything about it to get there, to be there, to stay there. And so the neo-Advaitins uh, tend to disregard the need for this sustained practice as preparation before you can stay there. As there, a lot of that came from Papaji, because Papaji, if you know his story, before he got to Ramana, he looked around India for different teachers. And he would get to the teacher and they would start to tell him something, and he would say, I don't want to hear that. I want it now. And when he got to Ramana, Ramana told him powerfully enough to look within himself right here and now and find it. And that gave Papaji what he needed. And then after that, he started to teach and do all the things he did. The Neo-Advaitins trace themselves back to Papaji as best I can understand, and Papaji's attitude of, I don't want to practice, I want it now. And some people can do that.
Mhm.
I personally have never met anyone like that, and I've known people besides Nomi and Ramana that were self-realized. One of Nomi's people who came to satsang over a period of several years, I saw her come to self-realization. And so she was one of these people who practiced intensely for years. And then that part of her that was the individual person just fell away. And it was also kind of odd talking to her because she was my friend. And after this happened, again, it was like there was some part of her that wasn't there anymore. And the part that wasn't there anymore, I think, is this ego interaction that we have between other people who are people.
Oh, yes. So tell me more about what the ego is.
The ego is just a bad idea. And the ego is this sense of existing as an individual separate from and in this complex world. And the ego is if you look closely, the ego is at the base of all of the thoughts of the mind. And all of your thoughts, if you examine them closely, end up revolving around this idea of yourself as an individual, set off from the world, interacting in the world, but it's just you and the world. And the problem with that is this separation. And one of the hearts of Ramana's teaching is no difference.
Okay.
Nomi was had a wife, and while I was with him, sometimes they would have service days where you go to the temple and clean up and do stuff like that. And so at a service day, while I was there working on some baseboard problem on the floor on my hands and knees, she walked past me and she said, you know, work is no different from play.
Yeah.
And, uh, I thought about it, and she's right. The only difference between work and play, the activity may be the same, the effort may be the same. The only difference is in your ideas about it, your attitude about it. So, no difference is a real heavy idea. No difference means at one level, Walter, no difference between me and you. That's what you were talking about before.
Yes. I would say the difference between what I'm saying, I know there are a lot of people that will say that I am just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is there's no one having that idea.
Mm-hmm.
The idea just arises
Right.
in this space, let's say, called Walter. But there is no one in here having an idea. I don't, how do I generate, where would I get an idea from? You
Uh-huh.
know, like how
Uh-huh.
did they just pop in there? And in other words, it's
Well,
sort of another way
uh-huh.
of talking about free will, you could say, is but the difference between saying I have no free will is there's actually no I to have or not
Right.
have free will. There's just really no one here.
Right.
Is a way
And
of putting it, you know,
uh-huh.
but there's obviously a body mind organism, as maybe Ramesh Balsekar would talk about, um, from which the speaking happens.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ramana would say, I have no sankalpa. And sankalpa is a Sanskrit word meaning essentially individual desires or wills. So I have no sankalpa. And yet he would still do things. He kept busy.
Well, this is, I don't know if this would be Ramana related, but this idea of doing happens, but there is no doer. So, there's running, but no runner. There's thinking, but no thinker. There's drinking, but no drinker. You know,
Uh-huh.
I
Well, this
just,
is also
yeah,
the problem comes from identification as the body. You can have thinking with no thinker if you're not the body. If you're the body, then you're never going to get there.
right. So, but it's the one that believes it's the body that is actually not an autonomous, independent thing. It's just this sort of happening that appears to
Mm-hmm.
be separate individual people
Mm-hmm.
who are making choices and doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, if there's a belief that there's a person inside there or a choice
Mm-hmm.
maker or, then that's what seems to be happening too. It's sort of the same appearance. It could appear as Ramana Maharshi. It
Right.
could appear as
Right.
someone very identified and very attached and very, believing they're the body and doing, they're living their life and they're making their choices and they're the captain of their ship, let's say.
Yes, the
Yeah.
metaphor Ramana would use, and I know others have, is it's like we are a wave, and we think that's who we are, and we don't notice that we're the ocean.
Right. Yes. I guess what I'm suggesting is that the we that thinks it's the ocean or thinks it's the wave is the same, let's say, no thing appearing as
Uh-huh.
those thoughts, you know.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
even this, you know, when I say I'm suggesting, there's no I that is suggesting. It's just it seems to be a suggestion coming
Well, that's
out.
just what it rises. Certainly, one of the things that you learn if you spend real time watching thoughts is one of the questions is where do the thoughts come from? And one of the answers as to where the thoughts come from is they just rise. You know, you got a mind, the mind thinks, thinking is thoughts, thoughts happen. Another uh, thing that Nomi would say about thoughts is Nomi would say that thoughts don't just happen. Thoughts are connected to these vasanas.
Okay.
And
Oh,
so,
I see. I see.
so the
Okay.
vasanas are your mind reaching out for happiness, and so it's not getting any right now or whatever, or it's looking where the next happiness is, and so the thought comes up. You know, I don't know which view is right. I've experienced both of them.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a lot to programming and conditioning and culturation, indoctrination, and
Mm-hmm.
these personalities and these traits and DNA and all this stuff that goes into what Walter is or how he comes
Mm-hmm.
off and appears to others and all these things. So vasanas, samskaras, these habits. Is that what you're talking about? So if we're so how do you change your vasanas?
First, it's another thing you have to get to the bottom of. The first part is the vasana is based on some misidentification, and you really have to look at it and figure out what is behind it. In many cases, what is behind it is the I am the body thought or some variant of it, or I am this thinker or something like this, or for me, I am this doer. And so you have to ask yourself, is that really who I am? If it's really who I am, that should be who I am all the time. Is that the case? And it turns out, no, it's not the case, whatever it is. So uh, continue to drive down in terms of your own internal investigation until you get to what is always there instead of what
I've
comes
heard,
and goes.
yes, I am that which never changes.
So that's one part of it. And the other part of getting rid of the vasanas is the vasanas are also based on some idea of some exterior source outside of yourself that brings you happiness. It might be a thing or an activity or a relationship, but happiness coming from the outside, because we all want happiness. That is a thing Ramana started several of his books with. Everyone wants always to be happy. And as I have looked at that in my life, I think he's right on. You know, all of our behavior is based on wanting to be happy. So if we think something is going to make us happy, we're not going to let go of it. We're going to keep desiring it. And in spiritual practice, you know, once you start to get quiet, one of the things that you notice is there is this happiness or something, some call it inner peace, or there are different names for it, but there is this happiness that is just there from your being, is what they say. I don't know where it's from. I know it's just there. And when you start to really learn this, then your search for happiness, you start to redirect. So instead of
If I can
looking,
interject, Richard, just to say that I would say the peace that passes all understanding would be this kind of beingness, you know?
uh
It's
huh,
kind of like this, I guess Michael Markham might put it this way, an objective overlay,
uh
you
huh,
know? So there's this, let's say this pure beingness, which is also a concept, of course. Um, but as you say, you have to put it into words, which then it becomes dualistic. So there's really no way. It's hard to F the ineffable, as Alan Watts would say. But so there's this beingness on which let's say on top of gets put this story and this narrative about who and what we are and what our problems are and why we should be anxious. Um, but say the essence of who and what we are is this unconditional love and this I would have a hard time using words like bliss because that's
right.
there's no experience of bliss that you know and if there is, it's just an experience. It's not really this thing which you're pointing to, which never changes, is always ever present,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And I don't use the word bliss. It may be the experience. When I saw Nomi for 15 years, I did not see him sitting there with a shit-eating grin on his face. So, I didn't see him frowning much either. My own experience, again, within myself, is there is this something that if I have to calling it happiness isn't so bad. I used to feel like it was peace of mind or something like that. Whatever
Mhm.
they are labels. And it's an experience that once you start to notice is noticeable.
How about Ramana? Maybe we could talk more about his life and him as a person rather than his teachings. Like, was he? Because he looks, when I see photos, he looks pretty blissed out to me
Uh huh.
in samadhi sometimes, just with his
Uh
eyes
huh.
closed. And so, and I know, like you're saying, people he taught in silence, and that there's, and of course, he's been dead for a long time, and so no, my point is, it just seems like there's this mystique around him, and this. I remember seeing the Razor's Edge
Uh huh.
movie, which I heard was based on him.
Right.
Um, so, like, just legendary guru status, that is. I've not seen anything like it. Just, I mean, when you think of guru,
Uh
that's the
huh.
face that comes to my mind anyway. Like,
Uh huh.
it would be the first name I would come out with. And just to have been teaching so many years ago and to still have, so many people out there like yourself teaching his teaching and sharing his message, or however you want to say it, but you're keeping the legacy alive with a lot of many other people. So anyway, I'm just impressed by all that. So I just wonder, like, what was he really like? Was it really that,
Well,
blissful?
there are stories that I've read, of course, and I think one of the examples of what he was really like is, he would get up every morning about 4 o'clock and immediately go join the ladies preparing the breakfast for all the people that were there. And from what I have read about him working with the ladies preparing breakfast, uh, the experience might be like what you would call satsang. And, he is teaching them things, inner things, and behavioral things also. One of the things that he was almost fanatic about is not wasting things. And so he would pick up a single grain of rice that had fallen to the floor. And he figured out how to make delectable food dishes out of things that most people thought were waste. And
So he was like what they would call minimalism today.
well, I'm not sure what they would call it, but I think,
Yeah.
what I see from him is, he was always seemed to be in this role of teacher or guide.
Okay.
A little bit, I experienced that with Nomi. I was the treasurer for the organization for a few years. And
Okay. And
so
what's the organization, if you don't mind, sir?
Nomi's organization was called SAT,
Okay.
Society for Abidance in Truth. And so I would have budget meetings with Nomi with my spreadsheet of the budget there and reviewing the line items and stuff like that. And I've had lots of budget meetings in business. And the budget meetings with Nomi were unlike any other budget meeting I ever had because, his concern was really about the how this stuff was being used to further the practice of the people who came there. And that made the budget meetings, again, more like satsang and spiritual instruction than it was about figuring out how to work the numbers so we had a surplus at the end of the year and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you spent time at the ashram, right?
At Ramana Ashram,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, we lived near Ramana Ashram for 8 years and were in it many, many times.
How
We
about the mountain? I don't know how to tell me how
Oh,
to pronounce it.
Arunachala.
Arunachala, yeah. So
Arunach.
how was that for you? I know that maybe you
Oh,
could speak about the mountain because it meant a lot to Ramana Maharshi.
I spent more time with the mountain than I did with anything else, and a big part of my practice for years. One of the things that people do about with the mountain is they go walk around it. Uh, do what's called pradakshina, and there's a road around it on the outside and then a dirt path on the inside. The road has traffic and buses and people. The dirt path has no one, just the forest and you and the mountain. And so several times a week, my wife and I would walk around the inner path close to the mountain in the peace. We would stop, we would take with us a spiritual text, the Song of Ribu, the one of the non-dual texts that is a beautiful and relentless non-dual text. And for our break, we would sit down by a tank of water and read a few verses from Ribu Gita and then continue the walk. And so I spent a lot of time around the mountain. With the dirt trail, one of the things, as you would see, is going off to the side, there would be another dirt trail. And I know enough to know that trails go somewhere. And so I spent a lot of time going on those trails and seeing where they went. And one of the trails I went to went to a place called Papaji's Cave. After Papaji got enlightened from Ramana, he went up in the mountains by himself for some time and stayed in this location.
Mm. Wow. That's
And
cool.
it was a very cool location. And doing that kind of exploring is just wonderful. My wife and I would go out with cameras, and I had a blog at the time, and we would take a bunch of pictures and write a story about our exploration on the blog. And it was all great. We learned.
I was going to ask you, but I remember Yuji, just speaking of people that met Ramana, him saying, uh, I believe it was, I can give it to you, but can you take it?
It was, if Ramana said that, I don't know that he
And he
said it.
thought it was maybe an arrogant statement. I hope I'm not remembering the story, but I don't know if you had heard that.
No, I
You,
haven't.
oh, you're familiar with UG Krishnamurti?
Uh, Only vaguely. I have not read any of his stuff.
Okay, okay. Yeah, Mind is Myth, I believe he wrote. But so that sounds amazing. It sounds like quite the place. And I heard there, I attended oh, I forget what it was called, but it was at the Vedanta Society, I guess, and they had a Ramana type meeting where they played chanting from there.
Uh huh.
And there was what are they, peacocks or something? I can
Right.
hear
Right.
they're chirping. I don't know what do you call the noise?
Ah!
Yeah, they're doing that. Yes. And so you could hear that and the chanting, and we just sat there and basically just listened to the recording of
And the
that.
chanting was probably Aranachala Shiva, Aranachala Shiva, Aranachala Shiva, Aranachala.
Yeah, probably. It was a long time ago, but yeah, that sounds probably right. I just found that. So you experienced that with the some of the animals there.
Oh yeah, all of there was every evening during the week. I don't remember if it was five or six. Then people would gather in at Ramanashram, and the women would sit on one side of the room, and the men would sit on the other side of the room. It is India after all, and then they would do this chanting, and during some of the chanting it would be the women or the men, and then during some of it would be all of them together, and it was a very nice experience.
Excuse me. Well, I really appreciate your time, and I wonder, just in closing, if you want to say anything about the things that you're doing regarding satsangs, Zoom meetings, YouTube,
Uh-huh.
website, anything like that you want to talk about.
Okay, just briefly, I'll say I hold a small satsang every Wednesday afternoon. Just a few people attend, and basically, in that, I uh, presently am reviewing one book of Ramana's talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. These were conversations that were recorded at the ashram over several years. And so I will read one of those and then comment on it. Ramana, if you look at what Ramana said, it's like his teaching is terse and condensed, and he says a lot in just a few words. And to really understand what he says, you have to get deeper into it. And so I try to give enough information so somebody who hears it really can know how to practice. because the point of all of this stuff is not to improve your mental understanding, but to give you deeper experiences of yourself, because it is this self-knowledge that transforms. So anyway, so I do commentary on what Ramana wrote, and then I do a guided inquiry where I break down what he said that time into questions that you can investigate within yourself. Because again, what matters is your internal experience. And so I try to do a guided inquiry to lead to that experience. So that's that. And then we talk about whatever questions people have. I do that. I also have a mindfulness group that I do in some kind of similar way. What I found when I got to Chapala, I'm really interested in supporting people's practice. And again, my own experience is practice is what I have found is good for me, and I think it helps, is supportive to other people. And uh, people,
And
some
it'll get you to Carnegie Hall as well.
that's right. That's right. And that some people are ready to hear Ramana, and my experience is those that are kind of ready to hear it, from the first time they hear, they have some kind of rapport, some kind of connection, something there, even if they haven't heard it before. That's some people, but that's still a small group of people. More people are not really ready to dive into it. And kind of for them, then I teach mindfulness, and with the real purpose of teaching them how to get their mind quiet, because the quiet mind is where these deep experiences start to occur. You need the quiet mind first as preparation. So uh, I do that. The other, and those are both Zoom things. And, basically anybody is welcome if they can figure out how to find me. And then the other thing I do on YouTube is every day I do a short piece from this same book, Talks, and just a commentary on it. And I try to have that to be some about 8 to 10 minutes, because what I've found is people are more willing to listen to a little short thing than they are a long thing. And Ramana has such deep teaching. I feel like the wisdom that comes into these sessions is all from Ramana, and all I'm doing is kind of shining a light on Ramana. And I know from comments that it actually still touches people and helps them deepen their practice. And so for that, I am grateful to be able to do that. I feel like, what can I do in this life? What I've learned is that a way to be happy in the world is through giving. And the thing that is most important to give is from yourself, whatever it is, to give deeply from yourself. And this is what I have to give. And so, I'm just
That's
doing all I
beautiful.
know to be happy.
Oh, that's beautiful.
The other
And
thing
I,
I
I
would say,
remember why I brought up the animals, because I remember he had a really interesting relationship. Uh, was it a cow?
oh, it was not just a cow. A
Yeah.
cow was part of it. Lakshmi the cow was the famous cow, and that cow, when it saw him, it would jump up and down like a dog would. And
Wow.
he
I've
also
never
had
seen a cow do that. That sounds
and
amazing.
he had relationships with lots of different animals, squirrels. He had relationships with monkeys,
Maybe donkeys too,
with
and
monkeys.
oh,
And there's a famous story about him and the monkey. He was sitting there with his people having a meal, and a
oh, wow.
monkey came and sat down beside him. And
Yeah,
the monkey, Ramana recognized the monkey as the king monkey of some monkey tribe. And Ramana started to feed the monkey food from Ramana's own plate. And now, of course, Ramana's disciples who were there had to be sitting there thinking, oh my God, Ramana never fed me from his plate. And then the monkey bit him.
oh,
And instead of chasing the monkey off or anything, he had the people bring the monkey his own plate. And then the
oh,
monkey ate, and the monkey was happy, and the monkey left. And the people after that said, what's up, Ramana? You know, that monkey came and bit you, and you
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
do anything back to him. And he
You
said,
didn't hold a grudge.
you have to understand that this monkey was the king monkey, and as such, he felt like he should be respected.
No.
And he once I gave him his own plate, he was satisfied.
Um, yeah, it's. I know I was ending the thing, but now I'm thinking about all the animals. Like he used to. He was in the cave, and the rats would be biting him, and it wouldn't affect him at all.
Well,
So he seemed impervious to the pain.
Well, what he would say at the end of his life, he had cancer on his arm, which is what he died from. And early in the cancer, they had a doctor come and do a biopsy on his arm, you know, which is a kind of surgery. And the doctor wanted to get Ramana an anesthetic, and Ramana wouldn't take the anesthetic. And so the doctor operated on his arm, got the biopsy, bandaged it up, and went away. And one of Ramana's disciples said, didn't that hurt?
The
And
normal thing to say.
yeah, a normal thing. And Ramana said, the body had pain. Am I the
Right.
body?
No, yeah, no identification with the body. Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, to me,
Yeah.
that seems fairly serious stuff. Now, Nomi has had Parkinson's disease for the last 20 years. And
Okay.
so when he speaks now, there's more hesitation. You can see difficulty he has moving around and stuff like that. Lots of physical issues with it. I maybe 10 years ago, I had a private conversation with Nomi, and we talked about his Parkinson's disease. And by the time we were through, he was laughing. We were laughing together about his Parkinson's. I had two other friends who had Parkinson's and died from it, and we never laughed once.
Okay. I remember Nisargadatta Maharaj said, I came into this world crying and I'm going to leave laughing.
That's good. I love it. I love
So,
it.
well, with that, yeah. So, is there an email or is there some way people could find you if they wanted to know more, a mailing list or something like that?
I don't know. The best I have is at YouTube. Richard Clarke Advaita is the channel, and
Beautiful.
go there, listen to something, make a comment, and if you want, I'm very happy to give you email addresses and follow up that way. I can give you my email address, but it sucks in terms of uh, being user friendly. My email address is aranachalakendall@gmail.com, and there's a story behind it that I won't bother you with. But, and, I'm happy, as I say, to do whatever I can to support people's practice. And anything I can do that way is what I want to do.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much. And I think if people are interested in the practice, the self-inquiry, also the mindfulness, they can look you up and learn more about that, right?
Yes, yes.
Excellent, excellent. And obviously, Ramana Maharshi, um, there's plenty of content there about Ramana. Um, a wealth of information and slides. It's not just talking heads. There's a lot of visual stuff going on there, which is helpful as a visual learner. I appreciate that. So anyway, it's good. It's really helpful. Thank you. And I
Okay.
appreciate your time today. I appreciate you doing the interview.
Well,
Take
very
care.
good. Thank you for the interview, Walter.
No, it was my pleasure. All
Namaste.
right, I'll see you around. Namaste.